They love it because they raise their prices and you continue to pay their raised prices, but you're not making any more money. That's a problem for you. So you got to make sure that you're accounting for these little and easy to overlook things in your expenses. A red flag is always if someone gives you a really round number, if they say it's 13,000 on like something like a monthly expenses, or how much money did you make last month? And they go, I made $25,000. That's not true. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cheer Biz Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Cotton, and today we are going to be talking, and I'm fired up, you guys. I am so fired up right now. We are going to be talking about the fact that your math can lie to you and why it's so important that you get it right. Now, before we get into the episode, please make sure if you're a gym owner, you have joined our Cheer Gym Owners Group on Facebook. And if you're a coach, join our All-Star Cheer Coaches and Owners Group, where we have all sorts of great content. I'm posting some new content in the All-Star Cheer Coaches and Owners page, so make sure you're checking that stuff out. Also, check out Fireside Chats with Danielle and Justin Johnston. They're absolutely awesome. They have back and forth conversation. They have podcasts available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as it's available on YouTube. I also have a request. If you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, please go and subscribe to that. We have so much awesome content on YouTube that people just don't see very often because it's not frequently used. So make sure you're over on our YouTube channel and checking the things we have on there. If you're looking to join the Academy, head on over to nextgenowners.com and book a call with my team where you can learn more about what the Academy is and how you can join. And last but not least, get registered for our conference in Dallas, Texas, June 20th through the 23rd this summer. It's going to be the best conference in the industry. You're not going to want to miss it. And it's actually a 3-day event. We have skills training on Friday, specific training. So if you need to get staff first aid and CPR trained, you can actually do that at this conference. We also have a special guest that I'm not going to spoil, but we have hands-on spotting training that you can also sign up for. It is an additional cost, but let me tell you, it's going to be absolutely worth it. So make sure you get registered for our Dallas conference. You're not going to want to miss it. Okay, let's get into the episode because I mentioned I'm fired up, and you guys, I am really fired up. I'm going to record another episode after this, and I'm probably going to be spicy during that one too. So I apologize for those of you who were not buckled in and ready for Dan all psyched. And believe it or not, it's NCA week, and I'm not even going to be talking about NCA. That's not even relevant to the things I'm fired up about. I'm not going to NCA. I'm staying local, and we are competing this weekend. But this is so important, you guys, and that is that your math can lie to you. And I've seen a number of gym owners who think they're doing the math on how they should be building their pricing, and they're getting results that they feel really good about, but are telling them lies. They're telling them that things are going to be okay, and they're really actually not if they charge those prices. And this is the time of year where everyone is looking at their pricing, or you at least should be. And I'll talk more about that later, but you should be looking at your pricing as you head into the next season. It is very, very important to make sure that you get it right. I mentioned it in a previous episode, but now is the time where you make decisions that are either going to be positively impacting you for the next 12 months, or you're going to be paying the price for later. So if you need help on how to do this, please check out my book, Charge What You're Worth, the Cheer Pricing Handbook. It's right behind me if you're watching the video. We've had a number of people reading the book and getting a ton out of it. And I'm continually working on resources to make it even better for you guys. So I go into a lot of this stuff in the book, but the book actually brought this even more to light because in the book, I have a pricing calculator. And I actually have a downloadable version of it if you buy the book, and you can get your hands on this calculator. It's an Excel document that does calculations and tells you how to appropriately set your pricing. I even had people who read the entire book, and luckily enough, are coaching clients of mine. So they were like, hey, I want to go over this stuff with you. And I immediately went, whoa, stop. What's going on here? This can't be right. And then when we dug into it, we found out it wasn't right. And we needed to make some dramatic changes, which was stressful for them and they didn't really like. But I would rather be stressful right now and have to answer those hard questions right now of like why things are costing what they're costing versus be having the conversation with them in January of them saying, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. I'm not bringing in enough money and I've overspent. Where did I go wrong? And I've had those conversations with people too. So the first point I have for you guys is bad data in, bad data out. Now, there's a saying, which is facts talk and numbers scream or something like that. But numbers are amazing. And if you do the math right, the math is the math. But anything you do can be manipulated when you're trying to get to an answer. So when we're doing math on our pricing, you can do all sorts of unique things to argue or to manipulate things to get to the number that you want. So number one, when we look at bad data in, bad data out, what we can't do is work backwards. Now, I totally understand where you're coming from. If you're in a position where you're like, I know that I'm comfortable charging X dollar amount. So what I'm going to do from that is I'm going to work backwards and figure out what I need to do to charge this dollar amount that I'm comfortable with. The problem is you can't manipulate the data working backwards. So you have to be willing to get to the end and say, oops, there's no way to charge this with the way I've set out the potential facts. And where I see people manipulate this is they go, well, I want to charge this dollar amount, which means I need to have this number of kids in this program. And when you go, well, how many kids do you have? They're like, oh, half that. Okay, well, that's not realistic. You can't charge that then. You can't charge it based off of 100% increase in numbers going into next year. You can't expect to just double your athletes and suddenly things are going to work out well. So that would be a bad data input, is assuming you're going to have a certain number of athletes. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I approach it. There is no way to get to any sort of a pricing determination without making some loose assumptions on things, i.e., the longer you've been in business, the more you can probably feel like you can predict what kind of numbers you're going to have year to year, predict that you're not going to drop too dramatically or even allow for a 10% decrease or something like that. There are some things that you can predict. The other element of bad data in, bad data out is if you don't know what your costs actually are. And this drives me bonkers, everybody. This is part of why I'm so fired up, because I'm talking to gym owners from across the US and Canada and all over the place. I'm talking to people and I'm finding more and more people when I say, what is your total monthly expenses? The amount of people that say, what do you mean, is like, it's amazing. How many people are like, well, what do you mean? I mean your total monthly expenses, like every single thing, every dollar you spend, what is the total? And they go, well, I don't really know. And then we can do the math and we can figure it out. We can pull up bank statements. We can do those things. But the amount of people that don't actually know what their true monthly expenses are is concerning. And then if you just if you just pick a number, if you just go, oh, it's this, you're not getting accurate data. That's bad data. Now you may get close and you may understand enough to be close to your total monthly expenses. But I mean, literally everything. You have to know either, and I would actually recommend, you have to know what your average monthly expenses are, which means you should be able to pull from last year. And if you do have basic accounting and you've been doing your taxes, you should have this information. You should be able to pull, what was my total spend? How much money did I spend last year on everything? And you should be able to pull that data. Now, it can get complicated because if you are putting things on credit cards and not pulling them out of the bank and playing with debit and checks, then you have to also factor that in. So that was another expense. You know, you may carry that forward into previous or next year's, follow-on years, but you then are going to be paying interest on those things. So it can get really complicated. You need to know what your average monthly spend is. So the best way to do this is to track all of your expenses, credit card payments, everything that you do, and know this is what I spend in a given calendar year. You've got to know that. I'll use this as an example. I was talking to an owner who is an absolutely fantastic person, but needed to make some adjustments to their financial situation. And we were going through my pricing calculator and I said, what is your total monthly expenses? And her response was $13,000. Now I'll tell you, a red flag, is always, if someone gives you a really round number, if they say it's 13,000 on like something like a monthly expenses, or how much money did you make last month? And they go, I made $25,000. That's not true. Like, I'm just telling you, it's not accurate, because there are going to be decimals. There's going to be singular dollars. Like, the likelihood that they come out with these like really nice round numbers means it's probably just a ballpark number, and it's not like the true number. And we want the true number. I mentioned to this owner, hey, I know that's not the case. There's no way that's possible, because I know your payroll, and I know your payroll is at least equal or more than that. I'm not going to try and dime them out too much. And so if we have our rent and payroll, those are both expenses. So it should at least be double what you're telling me based off of what I know your payroll expenses are. And they were like, oh, I didn't know I'm supposed to include payroll. And I'm like, yes, that's what I meant by everything. You have to know everything you're spending. It is so important to know, because otherwise you're making decisions based off of bad data. So if I say, well, my monthly expenses are $13,000, and then I calculate, well, based off of this many kids, I need to bring in this much money so I can pay all of my operating expenses. Well, it's not even all your operating expenses. It's not even close to all your operating expenses. After we added everything up for the owner I'm talking about, we ended up well over $50K a month. And yes, this is me ballparking you, so I don't like call out specifics. Well over $50,000 a month in operating expenses, which you might, depending on your gym size, you might be like choking a little bit at that thought. If you're on the East or West Coast, if you're in some of those areas, you're probably in that ballpark if you have a decently sized gym, because rent and minimum wage and taxes and all those other things are really, really, really expensive. So you have to make sure that you have the correct data. You need accurate numbers to make accurate decisions. Bad data in, bad data out. It is way better to spend the time. I know it's a lot of work. Way better to spend the time getting exact numbers so you can make precise calculations and determine what the best path forward is. Okay, so please, you guys, know your freaking numbers before you go typing them into any calculators or using any sort of mathematical wizardry to figure out what you should be charging. You have to know baseline what it costs you to operate before you can ever talk about what you should be charging for your thing. It's just that, right? If I was a car manufacturer and I knew, well, it cost me anywhere from, I said, it cost me 10 grand to make this car at cost, so I'm going to sell it for 12. And I forgot to factor in that there's a shipping cost, and then there's a marketing cost, and there's all these other things. And actually, it really cost me $15,000 to make, and I'm now charging 12. I'm losing money. I'm going to go out of business. Okay, so we've got to be really strategic about these things. All right, number 2 is to not forget about the little things, okay? They may seem like not a big deal, but we cannot forget about them, and we've got to make sure we're accounting for them. When I'm talking about the little things, I'm talking about things that are easy to miss or forget about. Processing fees would be one. Okay, you got to factor in that you're going to have processing fees. Number 2 would be loan payments, credit card payments, things like that that are coming out that you're not thinking about in the moment because you're not getting a thing for it at now, but we're paying off past debts. So if you're a gym that was open during COVID, it's likely that you took some sort of SBA EIDL loan to keep your doors open. So maybe you have a loan payment. Don't forget that when you're calculating those monthly expenses. You need to know, what are those things that I'm having to pay back? Because those little things start to add up really quickly. And when you end up $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 short on your monthly expenses on a year, that really quickly turns into $60,000 that you failed to account for. And so you've got to make sure that you're on top of it. And a lot of gyms don't run at a significant enough profit margin where you can just absorb a $60,000 oopsie. Another big one that people are forgetting to take account of, and I'm going to call myself out, I did this last year for one of my companies, is taxes, payroll taxes, and expenses related to tax. So like workers' compensation, insurance, etc. And I'll tell you my little story. I failed to account for this with Dream Camps. And why or how did that happen? Well, Dream Camps had always paid our staff primarily as 1099 employees. And I felt that it was time to transition to paying my people as actual employees because I was setting their schedules a little bit more. I was really starting to like have more control over their work life. And And I could still argue both ways, but I just felt that it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to get them all on payroll and pay them as employees. And also it was because I care about them and they're college students and I didn't want to leave them with late tax bills. So I was like, let's just get this taken care of now. Well, I did not account for the fact that I also now am adopting workers' compensation insurance. I didn't account for the fact that I'm adopting federal payroll taxes, Social Security tax, all of those other things that I have to start suddenly paying for each one of these employees that I'm paying as an employee. I hadn't really budgeted for that. I didn't think about it. And next thing I know, I'm significantly over budget going, wait, what happened? Why did we end up that way? It's because I didn't account for that. I didn't account for that thing. And very quickly, now granted, I have a very large payroll over the course of my summer because I pay my staff really, really well. But when you pay out 80 grand in payroll, yeah, you're going to have a significant tax burden there. So there was like $20,000 that I had not accounted for. So you got to make sure that you're accounting for these little and easy to overlook things in your expenses. Now, I'll give you a little hint. If you're using the pricing calculator and you're looking at the different things that we do, I calculate payroll for the employee. Like I calculate for each week or each month what it costs to operate a team or a class and the payroll there. And then I have another section where we look at payroll and we actually are deducting it from our operating expenses because we're assuming that we're covering it in our payroll per class or per team. But that deduction should not include your taxes unless you've included it above, which most people don't. So it should not include your taxes when you look at what it costs to operate a team or a class, because most of us just go, oh, I pay someone this many dollars an hour and it's this many hours and that equals this many dollars a month. So I would personally just leave those taxes in the operating expenses so we make sure they get accounted for and they don't get deducted and assumed that they're being covered by the payroll that gets added back in later. Anyways, if you've read the book, that might make a little bit of sense. If you haven't read the book, it probably makes no sense. And I hope you pick it up because it's a fun read and I tell you a lot of stories. Number 3, profit is not optional. It's not. You have to charge a profit margin. It's not an optional thing. Please stop treating it as such. No company in the world operates with profit being an optional part of the business. Now, you could say a nonprofit does. They're still marking things up. There's still a markup for an event, a product, a thing, and they just aren't taking a profit margin in terms of like, it's not truly profit. That markup then goes to supporting other endeavors. So you have to have a profit margin. It's non-negotiable. I'm not going to belabor it, but you have to have a profit margin, period. End of discussion. Do that. Now, on top of that, you have to have a real profit margin. So don't be a baby and go, well, Dan said a profit margin is non-negotiable, so I added a 2% profit margin. Well, that doesn't even cover your credit card processing fees. So no, right? 5%, not enough. 10%, depending on the product, I can maybe say, okay, maybe 15, we're starting to get there. 20 and 25 and 30, we're starting to be in a healthier profit margin. Profit margin is non-negotiable. You absolutely, positively must have it. No exceptions. Charge a profit. Add in a profit margin. Okay. You have to do it. Otherwise, you're not setting your business up for success. You're not giving yourself the ability to pay your employees an increased wage. You're giving yourself no breathing room, and your business is not solvent, and it doesn't allow for you to grow, expand, have unforeseen costs, all of those things. You've got to build in that profit margin so you are prepared for the future and your business is successful. Number 4, this is my last one. You have to increase your prices every year. I actually just saw this comment on Facebook right before I started recording this episode. You have to increase your prices every single year. Inflation is a very real thing. So the cost of goods goes up every single year. You have to raise your prices every single year. I talk about it in the book. You need to do this. It doesn't have to be massive. At the very least, raise your costs across the board consistent with inflation. If you do that, you'll be in a better position. You'll also be training your clients to know that costs are going to increase every single year. So you need to make sure that you're raising your prices every single year, no exceptions. I've encountered so many different people who are like, I can't raise my prices because I haven't raised them for 2 years. Now people are used to them staying the same. Exactly. You need your people to be used to your price increasing every year. So then when you get to that point. And then next year, when you raise your prices, they just know everyone's expecting there to be a price increase. Now, can you get creative? Can you try to make it as little of an impact as possible? Absolutely. Can you look at your cost sheet and say, what are things that I can remove from this that don't need to be mandatory, that can be optional, so not everyone has to pay for it? Absolutely. But where you cannot cut costs is in your tuition. Your tuition is what stays in the gym. It's so important that what stays in the gym and keeps your business running doesn't get cut, because otherwise your business goes under. You need that money. So often people cut the money that goes to the gym because, oh, well, the competition's raised their prices, or our uniform price went up, or these things. So I'm going to not take as much money in the gym, but I'm going to send that money over there. So our price is going up, but that money is all going to those other things. But that's just money going in and going out. It's pass through funds. It's not helping your business grow. Tuition is the gold standard. You have to focus on running your business successfully so you can continue to grow. Otherwise, all you are is a really great affiliate for all of these other programs, all these other companies that are using you're using their services and you're paying them. Like, they love it because they raise their prices and you continue to pay their raised prices, but you're not making any more money. That's a problem for you. For them in the moment, it's fine, which is why I've always believed in trying to create products outside of what I do with NextGen, always trying to create products that help bring value, increase retention, that allow you to mark up, allow you to charge more. Like, I try to keep my pricing, and it goes up every year, generally speaking. I try to keep my pricing very competitive so it helps businesses grow, because ultimately I want every single gym and team and program that comes to Dream Camps and brings one of their all-star teams to one of our camps throughout the country to do an overnight camp, or uses us for a private camp, or uses us for choreography. I want them to be able to afford us next year. So I want them to be financially solvent. I want them to be successful. I want to see owners who are paying themselves. I want to see those things, because those are the people who are going to continue to use my services. That's really what I want to see. If you're not raising your prices and you're making those decisions and you're sacrificing on your tuition, that's a concern, and you're not going to grow. So you have to raise your prices every single year. Train your clients to expect it. Let them know that price raises are happening and it's A-OK. Okay. And if anything, you can just direct them to this podcast and you can say, I'm raising my prices because this bald guy in Oregon, his name's Dan, he told me I have to. Blame it on me. That's fine. I'll take the hate mail. You can send them my way, because I believe in gyms being financially solvent and successful will lead to a better result for everyone involved, to include your clients. Like, yeah, they're going to pay a little bit more, but as long as you're over delivering, they'll be willing to pay it, because you're going to be giving them a great product. You're going to be giving them exactly what they want. I'm willing to pay more for things that I want that are delivered well. So as we exit the podcast, my marching orders are this. Please, if you haven't picked up the book yet, read Charge What You're Worth. If you have read Charge What You're Worth, and you've started to use the pricing calculator, check out the additional resources that we've added to the site. We're going to be uploading a video that's going to be a video explanation. Full transparency, I already recorded it, but it got no audio, so not very helpful. So I'm doing it again today. Check out the video. Check out the comments that I've added to the calculator. So view it again. Check it out. I've added comments. I've added more explanations as we've gone through it. Go through it diligently with a fine-tooth comb. And if you need help, reach out to NextGen, get in the academy, let's get you a coach, and let's get your stuff dialed in correctly, because I want your business to be financially successful. All right, everyone, thank you for joining me. I know I was fired up, and I know I'm talking about math, which is not the most exciting thing, but your pricing is the single most important factor for you to focus on right now in your business as you head into the next season, especially with your all-stars, because once you set your pricing, you generally aren't making big adjustments on it for the calendar year. So you've got to get it right, and right now. All right, everyone, thank you for your time. With that, we will catch you on the next episode.